All right, I have the Spartan Elias Theodorou on the show now, who'll be facing Bryan Baker next on December the 18th at Colorado Combat Club 10. Elias, how are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm good, man. I appreciate you giving me a few minutes of your day today. And you've looked fantastic since we've last seen you inside of the UFC. 2 fights, 2 wins. Most recently, March round 3 TKO over Matt Dwyer. How happy are you with that win? Were you hoping to get him out of there a little bit sooner? Or are you pretty pleased overall with your performance?
I'm pleased overall, especially with COVID and delays in regards to what we had planned. It's good to get into the cage and in many ways, kind of enjoy every minute of it. And that's exactly what I did. I could have probably put him away in the second, but I kind of played with my food, if you will, until the third.
Okay, very good. I like the analogy. What has life been like for you as far as training and just life balance since we have seen you in the UFC? Because obviously the MMA community out there, they know you from winning the Ultimate Fighter, and you were very successful inside of the octagon. So we haven't seen a whole lot of interviews from you since, or at least I haven't. So just tell me a little bit about what life has been like.
Yeah, no. Since leaving the UFC, I've very much focused on my advocacy for cannabis. My last fight, I made history as the first sanctioned cannabis athlete in Canada. I did so with Rise Fighting the Stigma, where I was both fighter and co-promoter. And I'll be doing much the same with my next fight. In many ways, I'm making history once again in Colorado, where I look to validate my therapeutic use exemption, which allows me to medicate with cannabis in competition. And once again, setting precedent not only for myself but other athletes to be able to use cannabis as a medicine if their doctor prescribes so, and kind of doing my part to be on part of the cannabis side of history. And that's what basically I've been doing. I'm currently in Vegas right now. I was a part of the World Series of Poker. I kind of took up poker over the course of COVID, and I don't suck. So went on a couple of tears, a couple solid runs here in Vegas, and not bad for someone that's been basically playing poker for only a year. I partnered with one of the top poker companies in the world, GG Poker, and I've done some really cool stuff in that regard. Like, kind of my claim to fame is, I don't drink and drive, but I'll drive my car to a bar, I'll drink, and then I'll just leave it there, and no matter how far it is, I'll run to it the next day. And usually, because there's always a tournament kind of going on online, I'll run to it. And I've run like half marathons and like placed final tables on poker tournaments. I won some decent cash along the way. So it's been a wild ride. Kind of doing me. I'm very lucky to be at a place where I don't need to fight if I don't have to, but I fight because I love it, and I'm fighting for something bigger than myself.
Very good. And as far as, running to find your car at a bar, what's the furthest you've had to go? I mean, if you're running half marathons, it's probably no big deal, but what's the furthest you've had to go as far as retrieving your car the next day?
About 25 kilometers. So it's just a little over what we call the half marathon.
Okay. All right. And I'm not going to get into too much with the poker thing because you take all my money. All my friends beat me and I'm no good at poker. So I'm going to digress there. But I did want to just circle back to what you're talking about your advocacy for cannabis. You're going to be the first professional athlete to compete in the USA with a medical cannabis exemption. How did this all come about? Because this is a very big deal. And I know there's a lot of professional athletes out there that feel just like you, that believe that, there should be, cannabis that shouldn't be outlawed. People should be able to use it for recovery purposes. So just tell me how this all came about.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it, right? It's been a long process. I originally started it back in 2015 when I was with the UFC. And during that process, it was an uphill battle because USADA, the third-party testing that the UFC partnered with, it's a US company, which gets most of its funding from the US government. So they have to look at cannabis as a Schedule I drug, which unfortunately means it has no medical properties under the eyes of the law and the government. Now, fast track to me, essentially parting ways with the UFC. I was able to be a free agent and an agent of change for cannabis, taking it back to the Commission of British Columbia, which approved my therapeutic use exemption, which I applied for under the Charter of Rights and Freedom, and afforded to me, with medical rights that we have in Canada. So that approval was something even bigger than USADA, because the commissions are actually governed by the provincial and state governments. So my approval for therapeutic use exemption for cannabis in British Columbia was actually approved by the British Columbia government via the commission. So in Canada, it's actually another foundation of medical cannabis rights. So too, now fast tracking to Colorado, when I applied this year as well, and I was approved for a therapeutic use exemption, the Colorado state government runs the commission. And this is the first time that their government, a US government, state government run, has approved cannabis as a medicine in professional sports. So again, this is another foundation of medical cannabis rights here in the US as well. And it sets precedent not only for myself, but of other athletes. And the whole game plan kind of moving forward is other athletes can come here to go to British Columbia or come here where I'm going to be fighting next in Colorado and apply for their own therapeutic use exemptions. And then they can go into different jurisdictions and apply for other ones as well. So, you know, the door that I opened could potentially pollinate the rest of the states and the rest of Canada. Although I think in many ways, Canada's kind of open now in that aspect because of the precedent that I made.
That is very cool. And I don't know if you can tell, but I got Nick Diaz over my right shoulder and Nate Diaz down here. So I know that they would approve of this very much so. How would, or I guess, how does, you know, the cannabis usage, how does that benefit you in camp? Because we know how grueling of a sport this is, all the bumps and bruises, everything that you go through to get ready to fight. How much of a benefit is you to get you more prepared to step into the cage and compete?
Well, that's exactly it, right? Like, it's not an easy job and it's not for everyone. But at the same time, I have a medical condition called bilateral neuropathy. It's essentially nerve damage of my upper extremities. And instead of using first-line medicines like opioids, painkillers, SSRIs, and antidepressants that USADA basically forced me to take when I was with the UFC, it was very ironic or even sad, I would say, when I was kind of going through my USADA my USADA therapeutic use exemption process, because they had a campaign where they were trying to, you know, create awareness of the addiction properties of opioids while they were telling me to take more opioids. Again, it's a backwards, outdated system that I'm fighting. And, you know, I use it for pain management instead of taking those medicines like I mentioned, which don't work as well as cannabis and have a detrimental effect on me, side effects on me, like constipation, being bloated, weight gain, which again, now that I'm like a month, 5 weeks out from a fight, I'm starting to cut, you know, weight, and obviously any additional weight that's put on because of side effects of first-line medicines is a detriment to me, not only as a patient, but also as an athlete as well.
Yeah, very well said. And I applaud you for your efforts. I know there are a lot of athletes out there that got to be very happy with what you're doing and the precedent that you're setting. So glad you got a chance to elaborate a little bit more on that. I did want to ask you too, before we transition to your upcoming fight, it's been since what, 2019, since we saw you compete inside of the UFC. And I got to be honest, man, I know you talked about it a little bit, but I was blown away and shocked when they let you go. I mean, you were 8-3 inside of the octagon. You won the Ultimate Fighter, and you just had that one loss to Derek Brunson, and then boom, you were gone. Looking back at it now, where are you at right now as far as, you know, processing that and just because I'm sure that wasn't easy for you. It seems like every fighter I talk to wants to be in the UFC. So just tell me, you know, I guess where your head's at right now, looking back at that whole ordeal.
To be completely honest, it's probably one of the best things that ever happened to me. Obviously, the only thing that would be better than was getting to the UFC, winning the Ultimate Fighter, being there for so long. But I got to kind of develop, you know, my ability as a fighter, my brand, if you will. And you know, I developed into somewhat of you know, an advocate. Excuse me, sorry, an advocate. Now focusing on something bigger than fighting. I fight for not only myself, but for all athletes looking to medicate as prescribed by their doctors. And, you know, it was a bit of a shock, obviously, but at the same time, it kind of makes sense. The UFC is a business. I had won so much in the UFC that basically when they kind of hired 6 or 7 Canadian MMA fighters, you know, on the roster, they could basically pay all those 6 or 7 fighters with my paycheck. So, especially when you look at it in the capacity of you're only as good as your last fight, and my fight with Derek Brunson was, wasn't a great one. I think, the UFC very much is a reactionary company. And what they did was, as a reaction of my not stellar fight, they, looked at the fact that they had, just hired so many Canadian fighters, and some of them were, younger than I am. So they thought that, I assume that they thought that was money more well spent. In addition, I know for a fact my advocacy, me pushing, cannabis in a way that they weren't ready at the time, and especially with their partner with the USADA, I think, I probably ruffled some feathers in that capacity, whether with the UFC or, with USADA. I don't think that helped. But again, fast tracking, I couldn't be happier with what I've done, because it allowed me to very much kind of go back to my roots and what I fell in love with mixed martial arts, the fighter's journey. And my fighter's journey is trying to be on the cannabis side of history and knocking out cannabis from the prohibited list in athletics. And I'm 2-2. I'm 2-0 rather, right now.
Do you think if you keep stringing together some wins here, there's a chance that the fans out there might see a reunion of you in the UFC?
I'd say never say never. But in many ways, I'm very much focused, obviously, with the fight ahead. And, there's much more avenues, much more opportunities out there in organizations that, again, I'm very grateful with the great sponsors like GG Poker and other companies that I work with. And there's avenues in other organizations where I can proudly promote that and present that every time I step into the cage. So, that's something I'm definitely focused on as well. But never say never.
All right. How has camp been thus far? I saw on your Instagram you've been at Syndicate. You're training with Darren Till. You're also at Extreme Couture. How has this camp been overall?
It's been great. It's been fun to kind of get out of Toronto, get out of just basically home, and spread my wings in regards to here in Vegas. There's a lot of top level guys, and it keeps me honest each and every day. So, I'm training with some of the world's best, and excited to, put that all on the line come December 18th, when I make history as the first sanctioned cannabis athlete in Colorado.
Now, you mentioned Toronto, so I got to ask you real quick. I'm a big basketball fan. You're a Raptors guy, so how's your team going to be this year? Are you excited, or are you just maybe wishing you can get towards next season?
I think it's one of those things where, again, I think obviously there's been a lot of change up in some over the last couple of years. But they're still a contending team. And obviously, win or lose, they're very much a team that I get behind, because it's my city.
No doubt. All right. Now, as far as, weight class, you're still at middleweight. What is that cut like to get to 185 these days? Is it still pretty or fairly easy for you?
Yeah, it's fairly easy. I'm currently about 213 now at this point. It's always been about a 30-pound drop, give or take. I was a little bit bigger. Just because, again, it's just one of those things I was focusing on, some weight training and all that jazz or whatever like that. I'm a big dude. But at the same time, I'm a professional, and I've made weight every single time, and that's what I look to do. So I'm kind of right on par. By the end of this week, I'll be under 210, and they kind of chip away next week. So the last month, I'm looking around like 205-ish area, kind of going my way down.
Okay, very good. Now, interesting opponent here, Bryan Baker. He's 18-5, but he's only fought once since 2013. And when I look at the guys that he's lost to, I mean, he's fought nothing but studs: Chael Sonnen, Douglas Lima, Alexander Shlemenko. So this guy's fought a lot of high-level fighters. When you look at this matchup, what kind of a fight do you think you're going to get come fight night? And what's your overall prediction for how you're going to get your hand raised?
He's a brawler. He's going to try and knock my block off, but so is everyone else. In many ways, right? Like I've been in there against some of the best in the world as well, and I'm really excited just to do me. I think that's when I excel. Obviously, he has his game plan, and he's going to try and take it to me. That's how he kind of always is when he fights. And I'm just going to show him the difference between chess and checkers.
Very good. Well, Elias, I really appreciate you giving me a little bit of your day here today. Again, December 18th, Colorado Combat Club 10, the Spartan, Elias Theodorou meets Bryan Baker. Pleasure talking to you for the first time, sir. Before I let you go, I want to give you the floor. Tell people where to follow you on social media, and if you have anyone to thank, the floor is yours.
Yeah, no. First and foremost, you all can follow me at Elias Theodorou on Instagram and Twitter. As mentioned, I'll be fighting for Colorado Combat Club 10, which is going to be in Colorado, obviously. And a shout out to all my sponsors. GG Poker, as I mentioned. Perfect Sports. There's a lot of different other groups and people that have been supporting me all the way around. Stores and Bickle, which is the best vaporizers in the biz. And again, without me going through a whole laundry list, you can follow me on at Elias Theodorou to follow my remaining journey until I get into the cage and look to make history December 9th, 18th.